Good morning, football fans, and welcome to a new week of shows here at the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Smith, here on the Fans First Sports Network. Interesting title to our show this morning, NFL conspiracy theories and their origins. And we come to that topic today because today, July 7th, is the anniversary of a fascinating event. And that event is the alleged or purported crash of an unidentified flying object on a ranch outside of Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. That has become the granddaddy of all American conspiracy theories. That story has given birth to countless others that extend into the political realm, the world of religion, the global network conspiracy theories about one world governments, the Illuminati, whether the moon landing was faked, who killed JFK, was 9/11 an inside job. There are countless others. And those conspiracy theories even extend into the world of professional football, the National Football League. Living in this technological age that we do, where everybody seems to have a social media presence or is involved in a chat room, the world now connected through our computers, people have lots of time to sit and ruminate and theorize. And oftentimes when we do those things, reality does not seem to be as satisfying to us as alternate realities that we may create at our keyboards. And that is really where many of these conspiracy theories are launched, and they extend into the NFL world. And we're going to get into some of the more interesting ones on today's show. But first, for those who don't know, the Roswell story. The Roswell story is kind of fascinating. Again, we go back to July 7th, 1947, in a remote area of Roswell, New Mexico. A rancher, while collecting debris on his property, comes across material that he just cannot identify. He doesn't know the origins of it. Some of it is very silvery. It has a strange texture. There's some metal that he recovers. It doesn't look like anything he recognizes. And he immediately phones local media, local authorities, and they're as baffled as he is. Ultimately, the conclusion that they come to is that some sort of unidentified flying object has crashed on his ranch, and that the remains of that is what they are gathering. There's actually a newspaper article in the local Roswell paper the next morning, July 8th, announcing the crash of a UFO, which doesn't necessarily mean flying saucer and little green men, although that's how many people took it at the time. It simply means unidentified object that fell from the sky. And once that story was published, the military immediately descended upon Roswell. And there's a good reason for that. And I'll get into that reason in a second. But the military's presence complicated the matter because shortly thereafter, the Navy announced that the debris gathered on that ranch in Roswell was simply a weather balloon, that it was being used by the Navy to test atmospheric pressure, and that one of those weather balloons had fallen out of the sky and crashed onto the ranch. That story is bogus. That is not what happened. But because that story is bogus does not mean that an actual UFO with little green men inside crashed on the ranch in Roswell. The real story, or at least what we suspect is the real story, if you want to cue the conspiratorial music, is that because it was 1947, and because the desert in the northern New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada region was largely owned by the U.S. military. Much of it was being used to conduct bombing tests, the famous tests that would ultimately result in the development of the atomic bomb at the Trinity test site in New Mexico happened not far from Roswell. Government was undergoing lots of top secret stuff at this time. And one of the things they were doing was they were testing listening devices that could be launched into space and floated over the Soviet Union to listen for seismic sounds that would signal Soviet nuclear tests. So long story short, the military was creating these airborne listening devices that they hoped to be able to use to detect whether or not the Soviet Union were conducting nuclear tests and where they might be testing them and what kinds of tests, etc. And one of those listening devices crashed on a farm, on a ranch in Roswell. And again, the military didn't want anybody to know about that, and so they created the cover story that it was a weather balloon. But obviously, over the last now almost 80 years, the more intriguing narrative has been, oh, it was a UFO, and aliens are real, and on and on. And again, this has launched an entire world of conspiracy theories where people seem to be unaccepting of truths they find either difficult to believe or unappealing. How could Lee Harvey Oswald, this single loner, take down the most powerful man in the world, John F. Kennedy, in 1963? How could America land on the moon in 1969 when less than a decade earlier we had no space program whatsoever? We'd never even created a rocket. How could a ragtag bunch of jihadists with no true home bring down the World Trade Center and rain down terror on the most powerful country on earth? These things could not have happened. They had to be part of some broader conspiracy, etc. And this is how this stuff goes. And it's fascinating because that thinking, the thinking that like either I don't agree with this popular narrative, I'm uncomfortable with it, it doesn't make sense to me, and so it must be something else. That extends into the world of football. Football, in the last decade or so, has found itself at the center of some passionate conspiracy theories. So let's talk about a couple. What are some of the greatest NFL conspiracy theories, and from where have they emanated? One of the more interesting ones, probably the most recent one, is the NFL logo conspiracy theory. And this piggybacks on the heels of another one that the NFL is scripted, that I'll get to in a moment. The NFL logo theory really began back in 2022 when the NFL, the Super Bowl logo, which is usually put out by the league way in advance of the start of a new season. And they do it for publicity purposes and branding rights and things like that. In 2022, the logo that the NFL introduced in the spring prior to that season was hued in red and orange and yellow tones. Predominantly, though, the orange and the yellow. And then that year, two very surprising upstart teams made it to the Super Bowl. Neither the LA Rams, who are blue and yellow, those are the colors they wear, nor the Cincinnati Bengals, who are predominantly orange, were expected to get to the Super Bowl. And the online sort of keyboard theorists immediately jumped into this notion. They sort of looked back at the logo. They then, that had been introduced in the spring, they looked at the Super Bowl and they said, wow, the NFL is forecasting the Super Bowl. And again, this comes off the heels of the notion that the league is scripted. And so if you believe the league is scripted, you don't have to take that much of a leap to then believe that the league, maybe to let people in the know, or insiders who they want to benefit from this information, they'll script, or they'll mask, they will sort of encode, let them know who's going to be in the Super Bowl by making the Super Bowl logo the colors of the teams that they've scripted to actually play in that game. So when the logo was orange and yellow, it was cueing people in the know, to the fact that it was going to be a Bengals-Rams Super Bowl. That theory gained traction this past year when the Super Bowl logo introduced prior to the season for Super Bowl 59 was predominantly red and green. And then who did we get in the Super Bowl? The Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. So, I mean, it is silly, of course. But if you want to start at the conclusion, the NFL is fixed or scripted, and certain people have information that they leak out to others who are in on it, and you want to work backwards from that conclusion, then, this is a nice little way to cherry pick your evidence. All right, a big test to the Super Bowl logo theory will be this coming year, because the Super Bowl logo for Super Bowl 60 is out, and it is a world of pastels. It is light blues and yellows and pinks and purples. I mean, it's just like a menagerie of pastel colors, which would suggest what? I don't know. Maybe the Tampa Bay Bucks, if they go back to their old creamsicle uniforms. Maybe that against the Miami Dolphins. That would be my best guess. If you look at the Super Bowl 60 logo and you're a conspiracy theorist, and it winds up being Tampa Bay and Miami with all those aquas and pastels, then you might get worked up and say, all right, we're really onto something. All right, now where does the Super Bowl logo conspiracy theory emanate from? From a prior theory that the NFL is scripted. And that theory began to emerge in the 2010s, particularly when Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay and won one of the more unlikely Super Bowls in league history. Brady was 43 years old at the time. Many people thought he was washed up. Goes to Tampa. The league was reeling after its concussion lawsuits and all sorts of suspicion that they were burying information about the dangers inherent to the game, that they needed a ratings boost. They needed something to revitalize the league's image. And the idea that Tom Brady at 43 years old could go to Tampa Bay and win a Super Bowl, incredulous as that seemed to many, was a nice plot twist for the NFL, because you either loved Brady and rooted for him and loved that story, or you hated Brady and rooted against him. Either way, you were interested and invested. And once that Super Bowl occurred, then you got lots of people, including former NFL players, who began to tweet out about the league being scripted. Oh, the NFL's on script. And then, of course, every upset, every miraculous play, everything that wasn't supposed to happen and did, suddenly that was part of the script, and people would take to the social media, social networks, and publish about it. Within that narrative came another conspiracy theory, that the league was in the bag for the Kansas City Chiefs, that the Chiefs were being orchestrated, so to speak, or the results were being orchestrated so that the Chiefs would win the Super Bowl or be in the Super Bowl year after year, because the Taylor Swift narrative was very positive for the league. When Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce began to date, the league saw a huge surge in interest. The television ratings went up. The social media interest went up. The number of people subscribing to things like Sunday Ticket and NFL.com to be able to get greater access to live broadcasts surged significantly. The Kansas City Chiefs got 300,000 new Instagram followers in the days following the public announcement of that relationship. And that Taylor Swift was a home run for the league. And the more you could put the Chiefs on the big stage, the better it was for ratings, the more money was flowing into people's pockets. And so the Chiefs would get all the calls because that's how the league wanted it. Is there any evidence for any of the things I've said so far? Obviously not. Obviously not. But it doesn't stop people from diving in on those theories. Okay, if Roswell is the granddaddy of American conspiracy theories in general, what's the granddaddy of NFL conspiracy theories? That would be the Immaculate Reception. People probably know what I'm referring to simply by that name. The Immaculate Reception. 1972 NFL playoffs. Pittsburgh Steelers, Oakland Raiders. Raiders leading the Steelers 7-6. Final play of the game. Steelers out near midfield, too far to kick a field goal, so they have one final play. Maybe they're going to run a Hail Mary, something like that. But they wind up with a play where quarterback Terry Bradshaw kind of has to scramble around a little bit, and he launches a throw, not near the end zone, but down around to about the Oakland 25, and he's targeting a receiver named Frenchie Fuqua. And Frenchie Fuqua and Raiders defensive back Jack Tatum go up for the ball together. The ball hits off of someone, both of them, who knows, and it caroms backwards, back towards the Steelers' huddle, where it is plucked out of the air about 6 inches before it hits the turf by Franco Harris around the 35-yard line. And Harris rumbles down the sideline and into the end zone as the clock runs out to give the Steelers arguably the most improbable playoff victory in NFL history. But what occurs in the aftermath is fascinating because the officials, while one of them rules touchdown on the field, the other officials don't really know what happened. At the time, there was a rule in the league that said if a pass was touched first by an offensive player, it could not then be another offensive player could not be the next one to touch it. So if Frenchie Fuqua had touched the ball first on the carom, Franco Harris would not be able to catch it. It'd be an illegal touch. There was another question about, did Harris actually catch the ball? Did it hit the turf? He seemed to pluck it out of the air just before it hit the turf, but maybe it actually hit the turf. And the officials got together and gathered in midfield to talk about it. And in the middle of that conversation, the head referee went into a dugout. The game was being played in the old Three River Stadium, which doubled as a baseball stadium for the Pittsburgh Pirates. There was a phone in the dugout. The phone went up to the press box, and the head official, again, this is all right in the aftermath. The result is now hanging in the balance. One official has signaled touchdown, but the officials don't really know what's going on, and they're all gathered at midfield. And this is on live television, and there's no instant replay in the league at the time. And the official goes into the dugout and he gets on the phone and he calls up on the press box, into the press box, and he is on the phone for 5 full minutes. Can you imagine how that would play in today's game? 5 full minutes. And he finally comes back out and he signals touchdown and the place goes nuts and the Raiders are incredulous and they go ballistic and the Steelers win. From the time that Franco Harris touches the football to the time where they officially signal it's a touchdown, 10 minutes of real time elapses. And in that 10 minutes, the conspiracy theorists argue, what happens is the referees go into the dugout and they make that phone call and they get in touch with league officials, and the league officials say, we don't know what happened. There's no instant replay. There's no good camera angle because the cameras don't quite catch the carom cleanly. You can't really tell from any of the replay angles if Franco Harris actually pulls the ball out of the air or if Frenchie Fuqua touches it before Jack Tatum. And the officials or from the league office say, rule it a touchdown. And why? Because Art Rooney, owner of the Steelers, is one of the game's great guys. He's owned the team for 40 years at that point. Pittsburgh's never won anything. They've been one of the worst teams in the NFL for most of that time. Art Rooney's a great guy. And on the other side is Al Davis, owner of the Raiders, who's a pain in the ass. And the league office has had it up to here with Al Davis, and they make the decision, give it to the good guy. And from that immaculate reception, the Steelers dynasty essentially is lost, or is launched, I should say. They lose that AFC Championship game. They advance to the AFC Championship game, and they lose the next week to the undefeated Dolphins, the 17-0 Dolphins. But Pittsburgh rebounds from that and launches their 70s dynasty. John Madden, to the day he died, swore, that was rigged. To which Steeler fans for the last 50 years have said, boo-hoo, John, boo-hoo. Wherever you stand, the conspiracy theory discussion is kind of fascinating and also utterly overblown and totally overrated from my point of view. All right, that is our Monday morning opener of the Call Sheet Daily. Join me again tomorrow for another show and all throughout the week. Whiteboard Wednesday, State of the Franchise on Thursday, The Hot Route with Pez, conversations about sports and life on Friday. Got great shows for you. I hope you'll keep it here to the Call Sheet Daily. Until tomorrow, have a great day, everybody.